Okay. Yes. Okay. So we have started the session and we are recording it. Okay. For you.
Yeah. Yes. Great.
Okay. So, well, first of all, I would like to welcome our presenter for today, Dr. Lilian Ramzy Abdelmessieh, right? I'm not sure if this is the correct pronunciation.
Perfect.
Now, she's representing the Coptic Orthodox Cultural Center in Egypt, but also she's a medical doctor, as far as I could tell, and also recorded a PhD in biochemistry. So this is a very, very complex and difficult field, and also in molecular biology, right? And then you're also lecturer for the European College for Osteopathic Medicine, Holistea, or Holistea. That's the
Holistea, yeah.
Holistea, that's the French way of saying it in France. Today, Dr. Ramzy's lecture will be on the consistency of the most important scientific discoveries with the Judeo-Christian faith. It's a very interesting topic, more so because the theme of our training week this spring explores actually the connection between science and faith. So your lecture is very, very topical. So please welcome wholeheartedly Dr. Ramzy. And the floor is yours. Yes, you can start.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored and I'm very happy to be with you. The topic or the theme of science and faith is a great one. It's one of my great passions because I'm a woman of faith and I also love science. And one day in my life, they were two separate things. But then when I started to see the connection between them, I feel I grew in both in faith and in science. So the connection between them is something that I value very much. And I hope that I can show you this connection today through the most important scientific discoveries. These scientific discoveries are acknowledged and are basis for science now. But maybe not everybody can make the connection. So let's see them together and see how they are connected. Of course, I'm Coptic Egyptian and I belong to the Coptic Orthodox Church, and I'm also Reformed, like I'm both things. So I'll be discussing things that are related to the Bible and to all Christians. And when I speak about Coptic Church, I speak about fathers of the church, the patriarch of the church, who were very biblical and who explained the Bible also to us. So maybe you will feel this is very modern, this is not ancient at all. Yes, of course, but it's very biblical. And the Bible is ancient and the church fathers are ancient. So let's see together the connection between all this, if we can. Let me share the screen with you. I prepared a small, not very small actually, PowerPoint for you. I put maybe a lot of information, maybe too much information, I'm not sure, but this was to keep it with you if you wish, and you can refer to it anytime you wish to revise the information or make sure of it or find some references. So let's start. I don't know why it's not, yeah, here. So to start, I would like to introduce some definitions. First of all, the definition of science. So what is science? According to the dictionary, and a definition which I accept very much, It is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. So it's a study of the physical world. In short, this physical reality that we live in, we study it by observation and experimentation, which we call science. Okay? Now, there is another word or term that is a little bit different, or maybe you will find it very different. It's called scientific materialism, or this term is scientific materialism, sometimes called scientism, sometimes called naturalism. And this is the belief that the physical reality, as made available to the natural sciences, is all that truly exists. Or as Carl Sagan puts it, the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be. Okay, so scientific naturalism is different from science. Science is experimenting the physical world, but naturalism is, you have to say, you have to admit, you have to confess that the physical world is all that is. Okay, now let's go to a third term, faith. I'm going to cite a verse from the Bible. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." Okay, so faith says that we can understand God's invisible qualities through his creation, through the physical world, through what has been made. So we study what has been made, and remember, the study of what has been made is called science. So we use science to study what has been made, and this can make us understand the visible, the invisible qualities of God, the theology, the things that we do not see. We can take a glimpse at them through the physical world. Now, maybe we can be a little bit interactive. I'm going to ask you a small question. Faith. Is it okay with the first definition of science or not? And is it okay with the second definition, which is materialism and naturalism, or not? I mean, faith, can it be consistent with science? Yes or no? Can it be consistent with materialism? Yes or no? Is there any way I can see your interaction? Let me see. Is faith, or does faith contradict with the first definition, which is science? If you think it contradicts it, please raise your hand. Well, let me, I don't think there are many hands. Okay, do you think faith is contradictory to the second term, which is materialism? Yes, I think I can see some hands. Yes, very good. Great, that's it. So faith is in contradiction with the second term, not with the first term. Faith is in contradiction with materialism or scientific materialism, which says that the physical world is all that is. Okay, but it's not in contradiction with science, which says, let's study the natural world. Okay, so let us go further and maybe things will become clearer. So here, do you recognize the person in this book? It's Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, and this is his famous book, Principia. Okay, and in the introduction of Principia, he says, this most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all. And on account of his dominion, he is wont to be called Lord God, or universal ruler. Okay, this is Sir Isaac Newton. Do you think Sir Isaac Newton was a scientist or not? One of the most important scientists. Okay, and what he is saying definitely is not against science. But if you have noticed the definitions, it's against what? It's against scientific materialism. He's saying, after his great discovery of gravity and the planetary movements and all this, he's saying, wow, all this comes from a great being that governs all things. Well, if materialistic scientists hear him now, they will tell him, stop it, you're saying bad things. You cannot claim that there is another being beyond this natural world. So for them, Newton is not a scientist. So be careful, because sometimes when you hear a lot of statements against faith and science, it comes from materialistic science. It doesn't come from science. Science, as you see, Newton, after studying all this, he says, well, it's coming from a great being that governs all things. But come on, you're gonna tell me Newton is old, this gravity theory is old? Yes, you are right. This is old, and this does not belong to the newest things that I'm going to talk about, because they are things from the 21st century. Okay, so before we go to the things of the 21st century, I would like just to say that the founders of modern science, many of them were men of faith, men and women of faith, okay? So in his new book, Return of the God Hypothesis, the philosopher of science, Stephen Meyer, he's both a philosopher and a scientist, he says that many of the founders of modern science did not just assume or assert by faith that there is an intelligent being or a personal God behind all this universe. They did not argue this through faith only, but through their scientific discoveries, okay? And he named some of them, of the very old scientists, of the giants of science: Johannes Kepler, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton. As we said, I add Pasteur because I like Pasteur in a very particular way. Maybe I'll have time to tell you more about him. Okay, so all these scientists were believers, and they connected their belief with their science. They believed that there is a mind, a rational mind behind this world. That's why this world is rational, and that's why they can study it through science and rationality. And that's why they became giants of the modern scientific revolution. But nowadays, after the growing skepticism among the Enlightenment philosophers, I have just a small spelling mistake in Enlightenment. Okay, please add it. You're in the English department. And the Darwinian theory of evolution. So because of all this, a new view became more popular and began to replace these founders of modern science, began to replace their view and began to replace it by what? By the definition of materialistic science. The materialistic world is all that there is. But after this era of enlightenment and growing skepticism, new discoveries arrived. And if we read these new discoveries well, we will be astonished. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two discoveries from cosmology, the Big Bang and the fine-tuning, and two discoveries from the field of life sciences, the biogenesis and the genetic code. And maybe you noticed from the introduction that I'm a biochemist and molecular biologist. So the genetic code is my field, is the thing I study, and is the thing that drew me into this idea of God and science, because as one of the scientists call it, it's the language of God, this DNA molecule and the genetic code. But first, let's see the cosmology, because the universe started before the DNA. Okay, so the Big Bang. Do you recognize the dear person in the photo? This is Stephen Hawking. And Hawking, what did he say? In a very important article called The Beginning of Time, which was published in 1996, he argued that all the evidence seemed to indicate that the universe has not existed forever, but that it had a beginning. This is probably the most remarkable discovery of modern cosmology, yet it is now taken for granted. Okay? So this citation is by who? It's by the great scientist Stephen Hawking. Okay, so he's saying that all the evidence point to the idea that the universe has a beginning or had a beginning. Okay, and now it's taken for granted. Okay, you'll tell me that Stephen Hawking remained agnostic or atheist. Yes, you're right. But the discovery itself, what does it say? It says that the universe had a beginning, and this discovery was through many, many scientists. Some of them were believers, and we're gonna meet some of them. Some were atheists, but I don't care about their faith right now. Both of them, I care about the scientific discovery itself. It says that there had a beginning for this universe. Okay, so what does faith tell us? What do the scriptures tell us? Well, scriptures, the first verse in the scriptures, that Genesis 1:1 says what? It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. And in Hebrew, when there are two words, like opposite words, like heavens and earth, it means everything. It means the universe. You can easily replace it by the universe. So in the beginning, God created the universe. And before the Big Bang, we used to think, in the beginning, was there a beginning? Isn't the universe all that there is? Isn't the universe eternal? How does the Bible say in the beginning? But then the big discovery tells us that there was a beginning. Okay, so remember, naturalism says that the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. Now, the scientific discovery of the Big Bang is more compatible with what? More consistent with what? With the scriptures or with the definition of naturalism? If you are beginning to see how this discovery is consistent with the scriptures, I'll be happy, because it's not consistent with naturalism, which says that the universe is all that there is. Naturalism would be more consistent with an obsolete theory, which is called the stationary or the steady state universe, but not with the Big Bang. Okay, and from the New Testament, okay, I told you about the Old Testament, the Genesis, but in the New Testament, what does Jesus say? Jesus says something very unique. He says, and now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. Before the world began, Jesus was there. Before the world began, Jesus was glorified. Yes. Really, we cannot understand these words thoroughly without seeing how the natural world revealed to us that it had a beginning. And before the beginning of the natural world, yes, Jesus was glorified. And he wants us to know that glory. And he wants the people who love him to enjoy seeing him in that glory. Okay, now do you notice this priest on the side? Actually, he was the first one to speak about the Big Bang. His name is Georges Lumet. He's from Belgium. In 1920s, he suggested that the universe had expanded out of a primeval atom or primeval atom, sometimes called cosmic egg. And Lumet's views were rejected by most scientists, including Einstein. So in the other picture, I'm not sure you can see it or not, the same picture. So Georges Lemaitre with Einstein. So what were they saying? Probably they were discussing this, and Einstein said, "Oh, this is too biblical. You, my dear priest, is probably too influenced with the Bible. The world is so stable. There is no beginning." But then he was convinced, Einstein, and it was through Einstein's calculations that Georges Lemaitre found this idea. But sometimes you have presuppositions that make you unable to see, even with your own calculations, you see. But then, fortunately, Hubble, another scientist who has a telescope and an observatory, he noticed something very interesting. He noticed that the galaxies were moving apart. You see, they were doing like this. And I think he used the idea of the red shift and the change in their light and something with the Doppler effect. Anyway, physics and cosmology, it's not my field, but anyway, this thing was proved, and Hubble could convince Einstein that the world had a beginning, probably, because look at the picture at the bottom. They calculated, okay, through the observations, or Hubble, through his observations, it made it possible to work out how fast the universe was expanding, you see, like this, because the galaxies are moving apart. So the universe is expanding, and they could work backwards to the beginning of the universe. This, then it probably was very, very, very tiny in the beginning, and they called it the Big Bang. Now supposed to be 14 billion years. Okay, here a small stop about the 14 billion years. Some people think this is not consistent with the Bible. I understand this problem, but I would like you to notice two things. First of all, when the Big Bang was discovered, it was not said to be 14 billion years. They calculated it to be 1.38 billion years, 1.3, okay? And then they said, well, this can't be true because the calculated age of Earth is more than this, 4 billion years. So the universe must have started before. Then this theory is wrong. And then they found more evidence to tell them that the theory is correct. Maybe the calculations are wrong. So they multiplied it by 10. They put a factor of 10, and they say this very frankly, okay? So 1.3 times 10 makes it 13.8 actually billion years. What I mean is that math and calculations are not so strict. We try our best with calculations. What is more important is the event itself. And at the same time, calculations from the Bible, they are only deductions. They are calculations of the age of human beings. And some people, human beings were, according to the narrative of the Bible, were created in the 6th day. So the last thing, what about the other 5 days? Maybe they were not just 5 days, 24 hours. Maybe they were much bigger. Maybe it's a metaphor. Maybe as the Jewish MIT scientist says, his name is Gerald Schroeder. He says that time is relative, and the 1 second in the beginning of time is very, very valuable, okay, and it has more value than a day of today, okay. So I'm not an MIT physicist, but he explains it very well. On the other hand, you know that in the narrative of the Bible, also the sun and moon were made to calculate days, and this was only in the fourth day. So the Bible itself says that the sun and moon were to calculate days, maybe to calculate our days, okay, but not the days that were before them. Okay. Anyway, that's another debate, but I would like you to know that some of the creationists nowadays are called old earth creationists. They are very biblical. They believe in the Bible very much, but they believe in an old earth, old universe, and they take the idea of 6 days as a metaphor. And speaking of the Coptic church and the fathers of the church, there were some fathers of the church that said this even without knowing anything about the Big Bang or the calculations of the years. They thought of the days as metaphor. This idea of 6,000 years is quite recent. It's not old. And again, it's a deduction. I don't want to be against it, but it's only a deduction. What is not a deduction is the first verse, is that God in the beginning created this universe. What is not a deduction is the Big Bang, not its calculation of years, that the world had a beginning. Anyways, that's another scientist who gave more evidence for the Big Bang, because, okay, it started, the idea or the theory started in 1920s, but it was accepted in the 1960s because of this scientist. He discovered something called the cosmic background microwave radiation, and this was a prediction of the theory. They said if the theory is correct, then there has to be a cosmic background microwave radiation. The heat that was there from the very beginning must leave this wave, okay? So, and they kept looking for it, and this scientist, Arno Penzias, was the one who discovered it with another scientist called Wilson, and both of them got the Nobel Prize for this discovery in 1978. Okay, so what does Arnold Penzias, this Nobel laureate, tell us? He says something very important, and it is in the New York Times when they made, when they were questioning him about his discovery and his faith. So he said, the best data we have concerning the origin of the universe are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Okay, so as I'm telling you, not all cosmologists are believers because of this data. Okay, we cannot tell everybody you have to believe now in the Bible, but there are believers. Okay, and of course it is not something that has, I mean, like, we haven't proved the Bible like this, or we haven't proved God like this, but all that we're saying, that it's very consistent, it's very compatible. Open your eyes. Okay, and for the atheists, well, maybe you have other reasons to be atheists, but you cannot tell us that science is against our faith. Okay, and this discovery, does it have a theological implication or implications? For me, yes, and for many others, actually. So maybe you studied philosophy better than me, and maybe you know the cosmological argument. It was an argument from the very early ages, from Thomas Aquinas, another church father of the Catholic Church. And maybe you know the contingency also. What is a contingent being or a contingent thing? It's a being or thing such that if it exists, it could have not existed. So it's not necessarily there. It could have not existed. So, and not only this, contingent being. A contingent being also has a sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for their existence. Okay, let's try to see the Big Bang in this light. The universe could have not existed. It started at a point of time. So before that point of time, it wasn't there. Maybe so. It's not. It's a contingent thing. Everybody, all philosophers now admit that the world, the universe, is a contingent thing. So we cannot say that it is all that there is. Okay, and a contingent thing has to have a cause. So what is the cause? This actually leaves us with two causes. Not three. If you search the data, you'll find two causes given for this. One, a personal cause, a God, an intelligent being, a designer who did this, who decided at a point of time that I'm going to do the universe. And another explanation given by Stephen Hawking. We saw his photograph a few slides away. Okay, and he said the multiverse theory. So what is the multiverse theory? It's a hypothesis based on randomness. Randomness in the idea that there is something like a machine or producing universes all the time. Some of them are bad, so they do not continue. Some of them are good and they continue. Our universe is one of those good universes, so it continued. Okay. Why is that theory far-fetched? Because he himself said that we can never, ever know what happened before the Big Bang. Because what happened before the Big Bang is beyond the physics that are included in the Big Bang. So he can never prove this, neither he or another or anybody else, but he's speculating that, okay, maybe the idea of the universe is not so unique and there are many other universes. Okay, you can accept whatever you wish, the multiverse theory or a personal God. And I would like you just to know that it's consistent with the idea of personal God, and many of the scientists who shared in the discovery believe in a personal God. Okay, another amazing thing about the Big Bang, that it told us that time and space are created. Okay, so time itself is part of our physical creation. Why is that important for me, at least? Because before I wrestled with the idea of eternity, I couldn't understand eternity. Everything is temporal in my vision. But once I understood that time is part of this physical universe, it belongs to this physical universe, okay, I understood that eternity is possible because it will not be about this physical universe. Okay? Maybe you feel we need to explore more, but actually I have to run because this is our first discovery. So I will try to tell you the other three very quickly. Okay, the second one is called the fine-tuning, and it is very much related to the Big Bang because there was initial fine-tuning from the very beginning, which makes our universe a unique universe. It's not an explosion. The Big Bang is a word that was coined by a scientist which actually hated the idea of the Big Bang. He was interested in the idea of steady state universe, and his name is Fred Hoyle. And Fred Hoyle, when he was exposed to the Big Bang, to this idea, and that it destroys his idea of steady state universe, he said, oh, can it be just a Big Bang like this? And since then we called it the Big Bang. Okay, but it wasn't just a bang or an explosion. It was very finely tuned. And there is an important scientist named Penrose. Penrose is the colleague of Stephen Hawking. They got their prize together. They made the idea or the discovery of singularity together. So he is one of the top scientists. And Penrose explains that the fine-tuning of the initial entropy of the universe is this precise. Okay, look at the number. It's 10 power 10 to the power 123. Penrose himself explains that it is one zeros that can fill the universe. This means what? Okay, it means that the chance is very minimal that this universe came by chance. Actually, there is no chance that this universe came by chance. Okay, so Penrose is very skeptic, okay, about this, and he honestly says that he cannot explain the fine-tuning of the initial conditions, and he says that he's not convinced by the theory of his colleague, the multiverse, okay, and by another theory called the anthropic principle, which says that all this fine-tuning was to create us, an intelligent life in the universe, okay? And what is he convinced of? Nothing. He just keeps saying it is amazing, it is extraordinary, it's a big question mark. How is this universe finely tuned? Actually, Penrose is an atheist or agnostic, like his colleague Stephen Hawking. That's why he says, I cannot explain this fine-tuning. But what about people of faith? Can fine-tuning be a testimony from nature about its creator? Okay, you know, in Psalms 19, verse 1, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Every time I read this verse, I thought about the stars, how beautiful they are, they declare the glory. But then when I understood the fine-tuning, well, something more. It's not just the beauty of the stars. When we study nature, which we call science, studying nature is science. Science itself is telling us this world was finely tuned from the beginning. What do we expect science to tell us more than this? Okay, it had a beginning, it was very finely tuned. Can this be speaking about a great God, intelligence, who did all that? Well, keep it in mind. And you know, Penrose, if you type on YouTube Penrose fine-tuning, you will find the video, okay, where he's speaking about fine-tuning and about how he's so perplexed. How did this come about? It's a 10 minutes video, so you can all check it. Roger Penrose, fine-tuning. Okay, so it's not by chance, and at the same time, more and more discoveries. Okay, so the physicist Paul Davies asserts that there is now broad agreement among physicists and cosmologists that the universe is in several respects fine-tuned for life. So it's fine-tuned for life. The conclusion is not so much that the universe is fine-tuned for life, rather it is fine-tuned for the building blocks and environments that life requires. Okay, what does all that mean? It means that life wouldn't have been there if the conditions in the universe are not like that. Okay, so it says that all this is necessary for life to come. Life is such a rare thing. It needs very finely tuned universe to arise. So we cannot say that life is the cause of the fine-tuning, but we can certainly say that the fine-tuning is necessary for life. Okay, I hope you got it. And there is a big list of more than 20 parameters which show the fine-tuning, like gravitational force, electromagnetic force. People who are interested in physics will understand all this. But for example, the gravitational force constant, you can imagine there is gravity. Why aren't things collapsing and colliding and just coalescing with each other? Because there is another force finely tuned with the gravity which is repulsive. So they are very finely tuned, okay? You see the photo of, you know, this sound system, fine tuning sound system. You have to make it very, you know, finely tuned to give a good voice. Well, it's like this: gravity versus this repulsive force, and so on. Huh? There are many forces like this. So we're saying that all this to give life, and life is a very rare thing. Now, this will take us very quickly to discoveries from life. And life, actually, we can say that Pasteur, this French scientist, proved something called biogenesis, that life comes from life, that molecules cannot make life by themselves. Is this important? Yes, because 200 years before Pasteur, and this was during the Enlightened era, and during this philosophy against God, that they thought that molecules can gather together and make life. Okay, and in the small photo you see at the bottom, okay, this is a piece of meat with worms, and they thought that the worms arise from meat. Okay, they thought that germs come from soup. Okay, and Pasteur made a very elegant experiment. Look at the other photo, these flasks with a swan neck. So he got a flask, he boiled the soup, he killed all the bacteria in the soup, okay? And the swan neck thing made it impossible for air to come back to the flask, okay? And when air couldn't come back to the flask, it couldn't carry the bacteria that is in the air back to the soup. So what happened? Did germs come over the soup one more time? No, the soup could remain without germs for over 2 years, okay? So they understood finally that the soup did not produce microorganisms, okay? That microorganisms were already in the air. Imagine, I would like you to know something. Now when they go to the moon, for example, okay? And they, or maybe Mars, and they search for life. What do they search for? They search for microbes. They search for germ life, okay? And if it happens that they find a cell, a living cell, because this is what we call life. If they ever find a living cell, they begin to think that it's a contamination. Maybe it came with us from Earth, okay? You see how life is so rare, and it's on Earth, and it doesn't arise like this. And thanks to Pasteur, he proved it, and it wasn't easy to prove. And he, I can say, abolished forever the idea of spontaneous generation, that life can arise spontaneously, okay? But then something called abiogenesis was coined by Henry Huxley, a British scientist, who said, okay, no spontaneous generation, but of course he was the friend of Darwin, so they have to find where life started to say that there is evolution. At least let's know how life started from the beginning. So if Pasteur said that no life emerges now, and all the germs had a parent germ before, they do not arise now. They have a parent germ. So maybe the germ, the first living cell, arose from non-living molecules millions of years ago. And he called this theory abiogenesis. Okay, many scenarios were done. They called it primordial soup, another time for soup, because they still believe that a warm little pond, warm water in the ocean, something like this can produce a living cell. many experiments were done. So the most famous is by Urey and Miller, and maybe you studied it in your biology class, but Urey and Miller could produce only simple amino acids. Okay, this was great, us producing organic thing from non-organic by using ammonia and so on. So it was something interesting, but we shouldn't give it more than its value, because amino acids are just simple blocks in a very, very complex cell. And on the other side of the slide, you see a complex cell, how this cell is very, very complex. We cannot reduce it to few amino acids. Okay. Now, here we say that abiogenesis is a very active field of research with tens of hypotheses, but with very little progress. Don't think that anybody could make a life in the lab. Okay, all that they are doing is that they are changing things. Okay, maybe you've heard about, of course, we all suffered from this COVID thing, and there was this idea, was it made in a lab? When you hear this, it's not made from zero, from scratch. If ever this is true, it means that we got a living cell or an original virus. Even a virus is not a living cell, but an original virus, and they changed things in it to make it more aggressive, for example. I'm not saying that this happened, but I'm telling you that if ever you hear this, it means that they modified something. But did anybody create a living cell from zero, from scratch? No. Okay. And you can see three scientists in the slide. The first one is James Stewart, the renowned synthetic chemist, who explains that the more science advances, the more we discover the complexity of a living cell, and the further we get from discovering the origin of life. To prove his point of view, he explained the synthetic chemical complexity of each component in the cell. If you go to his YouTube channel, he made something like 12 hours series of this explanation. He is one of the top scientists today, one of the top 50 scientists ever. Okay, and he explains how it's very difficult to make a cell, and we are far from it. By the way, he's a very faithful believer, and he is somebody who tries to use his great scientific knowledge to evangelize and speak about Jesus, especially that he's from a Jewish background and he had a very powerful experience, and he loves Jesus from his heart. So he loves to speak about Jesus. He's not ashamed of this at all. And he uses his science, and he tells them, well, I'm one of the most famous scientists. I'll tell you about Jesus, okay? If you're interested, right, James Stewart on the YouTube, you'll find many of his interesting scientific and full of faith videos. Also, Stephen Meyer, he raises the problem of the origin of genetic information and the code in the DNA. And Stephen Meyer is the founder of Discovery Institute. That's a great thing also. And this is a movement called intelligent design. It's just the opposite of the naturalistic point of view of science. It tells that science is pointing to an intelligent designer. We can never say that what we see now in the fine-tuning of the universe or the fine-tuning of the DNA and living organisms can develop all alone, like spontaneous generation. Never. So Pasteur, with experiment, he proved it to be wrong. All these scientists are proving it to be almost impossible without a mind, okay? Jonathan Wells raises a very interesting point of view. He says, if a living cell is put in a test tube, we poke it, and all the molecules come out, and they are still in the living cell, which represents this ocean, for example. Everything is there, everything in a test tube, but does life come back? No, life is irreversible. So what is life? What is life? You know, Pasteur, he was also a believer, a French believer, so he was a French Catholic. He was a great scientist. The idea of destroying the spontaneous generation is one of his achievements, but he made the germ theory. He made us understand microbes. He's called the father of microbiology. And he said what? What did he say? He said that, okay, I can read it to you in French. I know that you do not know French, but maybe if you do, because we're in Europe here, so another European language. He says, qui vous dit que les progrès naissants de la science n'obligeront pas les savants qui vivront dans un siècle, dans 1000 ans, dans 10 000 ans, à affirmer que la vie a été de toute éternité et non la matière. Okay, so this sentence is very relevant to our study now. He says, who tells you that in hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, science will not prove that life is precedent to matter, that que la vie a été de toute éternité et non la matière. What is eternal is life and not matter, and not this materialistic world, and not these molecules, but life is the eternal thing, not the molecules. Wow. Pasteur said this even before the Big Bang Theory. And he said, maybe science will prove it, okay? So the idea that science will always prove that God is not necessary is a false idea. Sometimes science proves to us that God is more necessary than we thought, okay, to this physical world. Okay, so these are 3 scientific things we discussed, okay? What the Big Bang, the fine-tuning, the of life. Now, the 4th thing is very important, and it's my field of study, but I think we're running out of time. So I will just give you a hint about it. Oh, okay, this is before the 4th thing. This is the hand of God dilemma and the mystery of life. I cite a certain article by a German scientist called Clemens Rickert. I don't know the British, the German pronunciation. It's like Richard, but in the German pronunciation. So maybe you can check this article. But again, about the origin of life, he's saying that all the scientific experiments that are going now have many interferences, many interventions. Nothing is spontaneous. So he's telling scientists, especially atheists, please, when you do this, tell us how many times you intervened, because this is not spontaneous. Does this mean that the hand of God was needed to put molecules together? Okay, so it's an interesting article. Please read it, and maybe you'll have time to read the slides later. But very quickly, what is the DNA and the genetic code? This DNA molecule, it's a chemical molecule. It's a biochemical molecule. Bio, this means that it's in the body. It's not in nature. It's only in a living organism. So it's a biochemical molecule that carries information, that carries a code, okay? And it's a new discovery. It was discovered in the 1960s or late 50s. So something like, it's less than 100 years. We didn't know this before. So a molecule carrying information, okay? And maybe you can see the sequence, the letters. This is what we study in biology. We study them as letters, A, G, T, A. This represents the code, and their sequence, their order is the thing that carries the code, not their chemical nature, but their sequence. So if you say AGT, that's a code, totally different from TAC. Okay, it's totally different. The order is what makes the difference, okay? And please look at the backbone of the molecule. It's all the same. What does this mean? It means that any order is possible for the backbone. The backbone is not interested which base is related to it, okay? But the sequence itself is very important for the code. What does this mean? Okay, it means that the sequence of bases which carries the information is independent of the chemical bonds here, independent of the chemical phosphodiester bonds, okay? So the information carried by the DNA is not determined by forces of chemistry. There is no chemical necessity to put the code, okay? A code, a language, what does this mean? Okay, I'm gonna tell you this in a very simple way. And let's forget about the biochemistry. This can be in a seminar of biochemistry. When I was a child, I had a board, a white board. I think it was made of iron, but it's white, okay? And I had letters with magnets behind them. Maybe you had the same toy, but anyway, it's an old toy. And I used to put the letters to make words by arranging the letters. And when I arrange the letters, I make words and then I make sentences, okay? But all the letters are compatible with their magnet to the whiteboard. The whiteboard will not dictate the order. It's my mind who dictates the order, okay? The whiteboard is okay with anything. So the backbone, the phosphodiester bonds are okay with anything, with any letter that comes with them. Who puts the order? It has to be something else. It has to be a brain. It's not that. You know, if it was the bonds, then the bonds would have created patterns, but we don't have patterns. We have a code that is made of millions and millions of letters, okay? Bill Gates says that the DNA is like a computer program, but far more advanced than any software ever created. So that's the testimony of Bill Gates. He said that DNA is more complicated than the software he makes, okay? So can DNA arise by chance? Can computer programs arise by chance? Okay, can computer programs arise by chance? Of course not. If you are an IT, you know that you have very good mind and you are well paid for the software you produce. So why should you think that the DNA is produced by chance? Okay, nowadays, people who refuse the idea of intelligent design do not say that the order is created by chemical necessity, because this is proved to be not true. So no one is arguing that. They are saying that it's created by chance. Okay, so actually, it's not created by chance. Okay, very quickly, there is something called DNA replication. In our cells or in any living cell, in bacterial cells, we have machines to copy the DNA. We do not have machines to write. Okay. Copying machines. So everyone has a genetic code and it is copied. So this copying thing, I teach a course called Fidelity of Replication. So we say that DNA replication is a matter of fidelity. An appropriate level of fidelity during DNA replication ensures the ability of the organism to transfer genetic information from one generation to the other. So it's copied with great fidelity so that one generation can pass it to the other generation. Let's have a quick look at the scriptures. They say that God made the wild animals according to their kinds. Okay, now we know how is the kind preserved, because there is fidelity of replication. This DNA is copied very with very accurate things, okay? Very accurate mechanisms, and we know these mechanisms, okay? And the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds, and God saw that it was good, okay? Now, I know that the evolution comes to your mind. The evolution actually depends on two mechanisms, the mutation and natural selection. What is mutation? Mutation, I'm going to tell you what Francis Collins, the a very important scientist in the NIH Institute, American Institute. So he says that mutations are errors of replication. They are only errors. And they do not make a Spider-Man like Hollywood movies, okay? So he refuses the idea that mutation can give you a Spider-Man, for example, but they are only mutations. And he is, Francis Collins is a theistic evolutionist. So he believes in evolution, but science in general led him to God. So he is not against evolution. And he says, okay, we should be thankful for mutations, that they gave us evolution. But remember, mutations are only errors, okay? Actually, people of intelligent design are against the idea of evolution, because evolution depends on a very random thing, which are errors during replication, and another lethal force, which is natural selection. And they say this cannot replace a genetic engineer, especially if we know that most mutations are harmful. They are not the ones who say most mutations are harmful. It's science who says this. That's why we avoid radiation, especially if a woman is pregnant. Please avoid radiations. The radiations can cause mutation, and then it can destroy the genetic code of the baby and make malformations, okay? So mutations as errors cannot be responsible for all the genetically engineered marvelous code. This is the central dogma of biology, which says that the code is translated into proteins. Proteins are very important and very specific. It's like lock and key. You have to have a very specific protein to fit the receptor, to fit its function. Okay, that would take so much time. So I'm running, I'm sorry. But I just want you to know that this code is very complex, and the protein, which is the product of this code, has to be very specific. And example of a mutation is the genetic disease, which is called sickle cell anemia. It's caused by just one amino acid that is changed, and then the whole hemoglobin becomes not fit to carry oxygen in the best way, and many problems arise. Okay, so this is the good hemoglobin with a good protein. This is the bad hemoglobin, the sickle hemoglobin, and it's only because of one single error of mutation. You see, this is just to tell you mutations are not so nice, but at the same time, mutations can cause a variety. It's the thing which makes one with yellow hair, one with dark hair like me. Okay, so it's the thing which gave us our unique features, but it cannot invent new proteins. Proteins need a very complex code. Okay, so here I'm telling you that natural selection is like choosing between cakes like this, but it does not mean that it created the cakes. The cakes need a recipe to be created. Okay, and then the natural selection says, oh, this recipe failed, I do not want it, this recipe is good. But it is not the recipe itself. The recipe has to have a mind to create, okay? I have to skip this, but it's by Richard Dawkins, who said that before evolution, we thought that there is an intelligent mind. Now we know it, there is not. Actually, no, we don't know that there is no intelligent mind behind everything. And here I'm giving you just few codes. You know, this is a code. The note, the music note is a code. This is a code. Do you know what this is? Does anybody know? It's Rosetta Stone. It's something Egyptian. It has two old languages of Egypt, and through it, we could discover the hieroglyphic language, the old language of the pharaohs. Okay, this Rosetta Stone is now in the British Museum. It's a code. You cannot see the Rosetta Stone and say that it was done by chance, or, you know, it's code. What is this? The software. What is this? If you have been following the GACT, the 4 bases of the DNA. Yeah, it's the genetic code. Okay, so if all the code, we recognize that it was created through an intelligent mind to make something that codes for something. Information, here, information, you read it, you play music notes, you hear a melody. Okay, here the cell sees this code and makes proteins accordingly. You see here, the computer sees this code and makes a program. So how can you say all this needed an intelligent mind but not this one? So we consider that the DNA code is the 4th discovery that points us to an intelligent mind. The Big Bang, the fine-tuning starting from the very beginning, from the initial conditions, and to produce life, the rarity of life and its non-spontaneous generation, and finally the genetic code. Finally, I would love to thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope it did you well, and I would like to leave with you Romans 1:20 one more time, which says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his greatness, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, from science that we do to understand nature, so that people are without excuse." And in Hebrews 11:3, we hear that by faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Finally, I would love to say that we need grace. We need God's grace to understand nature, to be good scientists as the old scientists and as the new also, to really understand, to be not misled by our thoughts, and to be led by our studies to the great creator. Now, grace is the word that is most commonly mentioned in the Reformed Church, and also it is the word that I hear the most in the Coptic Orthodox Church. They say it in Arabic, Ni'ma. So with the grace of the Lord, we can do both science and faith, and have faith. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again one more time. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the audience if there are any questions you would like to ask.
Yeah, all questions are most welcome.
Are there any questions? If there are no questions, then I would like to thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very thought-provoking, also enlightening, I would say. And we hope to see you again at some point.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And for this lovely presentation. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.